Good morning. We're going to call this meeting to order, the Committee of the Whole for Wednesday, March 20th, 2024. First, we'll start with council announcements. Anyone with council? Oh, Regional Councillor Chan.
Good morning. Happy spring. The weather doesn't feel like it, but it is what it is, March 20th. Yes, I would like to share with my colleagues and also staff members, public, the Federation of Canadian Parties, in which I'm privileged to be elected director. We have a board of director meeting over a week ago, and it's lots of issues being discussed from representatives from local governments of Canada. And the issues we're dealing with in Richmond Hill and York region are certainly uncommon, notably, particularly on the housing issue, the gaps of infrastructure in terms of funding, that in terms of the how all municipalities in Canada are supporting growth in an equitable funding manner, both from the provinces and from the federal government. The issue of the also homelessness, and also the mental health, all those things that people would have talked about. And it's good to know that in the end, the FCM, in short, all members across the country galvanized that we are going to strengthen our advocacy towards the federal government in terms of having support. Particularly, that's relating one of the motion I put in today, that the formerly called the gas tax, now called the Canada Community Building Fund, need to be permanent, need to be giving all municipalities a predictable way of funding so that we can plan accordingly. The other thing is that notably is that also the FCM would push for a national mental health strategy, because that underpins a number of issues. We're talking about homelessness, in some way supportive transition housing, as well as dealing with, particularly in urban areas, of the large influx of the asylum seekers and refugee claimants and its impact on local communities. So that's the, in short, my news I want to share. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And next we have Councillor Tweed.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. This Saturday will be March. I'm going to hosting a senior house-related forums. I invited around 7 key speakers from Charles, from Del Manor, from House Peace, and from our senior mental health organization as well. So it's a public facing, and everyone's welcome to join. Location will be in Algon Mills Community Center. We schedule start from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. So everyone in Ward 4 or seniors in Richmond Hill, welcome to join this seminar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else with Mayor West?
Okay, I'm not sure. Wasn't sure where I was there, but now I know. Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to do a couple of shout outs. We have Ramadan began on March the 10th. So I want to wish everybody celebrating that great celebration a blessed month. And also we had Nowruz start last night at 11:06. I wasn't up for that, but for the next few days, we'll be celebrating Nowruz in a big way here in Richmond Hill as well. I just wanted to also mention that on April the 6th from 10 o'clock until 3 at the Richmond Green Sports Complex, we will be having our Maple Syrup Festival. So we're looking forward to that. It's going to be a good event like it has been in the past, and lots of kind of things to do for families. And I guess the highlight of the event, I would hope, would be the opportunity for people to have pancakes and real maple syrup. So you can register on my website, and that's helpful just to make sure we have enough pancakes and everything for people. And council, we hope all my colleagues will be there to join. We do have some skilled events that we're going to be asking you to participate in that have to do with pancake flipping. So if everybody can just protect their wrists, I don't want any sports injuries or whatever. And that's about it for me. I wanted to give a shout out to Councillor Shu too for last night's residents meeting. Thank you, Councillor. That was a good turnout and a good conversation with the community. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mayor West. Anyone else with council announcements? I just wanted to say that I let folks know that York Region Public Health can immunize kids, and we're hearing a lot about measles. And if you contact York Region Public Health, anyone under 18 can get immunized. So give them a call. I had all our kids immunized. I really encourage people to find a shot for measles and anything else they're missing if they're inclined. All right, that's it for public meeting. For council announcements. Next, introduction of emergency. Oh, you have another. Are we allowed to have more than one council? Okay, Councilor Tree.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to add some news as well. So this year, March 8th will be the it was the International Women's Day. I'll say happy International Women's Day for all ladies here in the chambers. Also, if you see this video as well, so happy International Women's Day. Also, March 17th marked as a St. Patrick's Day as well. So happy St. Patrick's Day. So I was in the one of the events hosting the Richmond Hill Legion branch 375. So it was great to see the Irish dancings over there. It's a fantastic event. So happy St. Patrick's as well. That's from my side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, moving on, introduction of emergency time sensitive matters. Seeing none, adoption of the agenda. Councillor Liu. Sorry, do we need seconders? No, okay. Do we need to vote? Yes, all those in favor? That carries. Next, disclosures of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. And yes, Mayor West.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I need to disclose a pecuniary interest on 11.3.9, which is the notice of intention to designate 124 Richmond Street. That building is owned by my brother and sister-in-law. So I'll be recusing myself for that particular item on the agenda.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none. Identification of items requiring separate discussion. I see. I would like to talk about 11.10, the traffic safety operations. Nobody else? Oh, Councillor Twee.
I would like to talk to the 11 point, give me a second, 11.3 and 4, 11.3.4.
11.3.4.
4.
Oh, that's already on the
Okay.
list. Thank you.
Got it. Perfect. Thanks.
Anyone else? All right, so yeah, we've done that. And now adoption of the remainder of the agenda items. Moved by
So I just want to, pardon me, Madam Chair, I just want to confirm that we are, regardless of the ones that are already held for delegation presentation, we will also be holding automatically 11.3.9 because the mayor has declared a pecuniary interest. So that way he's not voting on it. So
thank you. And adoption of the remainder of the agenda is moved by Regional Councillor Chan. All those in favor? And that carries. Next, we move on to public hearings. There are none. And now we go to presentations. And we start with Julia Smith, Urban Design Heritage Planner, regarding implications of Bill 23 to heritage designations. Thank you very much. And the floor is yours.
Great. Ooh, a little bit of an echo. Okay. Good morning, Mayor West, members of council, and members of the public. For those that I have not yet had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Julia Smith, and I'm a heritage planner currently working on the city's heritage and urban design team. And I'm also joined this morning by my colleagues Pamela Vega. Oh, yes, over there, Pamela Vega, who is the heritage planner at the city responsible for dealing with heritage permits and approval for alterations to heritage properties, along with Kunal Chaudhry, who is the manager of the city's heritage and urban design division. And all three of us will be available to answer any questions that council may have after my presentation. As there are several heritage designation staff reports on today's agenda, I wanted to preface those proposed designations with a brief presentation on the implications of Bill 23 on heritage designation in Richmond Hill. Next slide, please. So as council is at this point likely aware, Bill 23 was enacted by the province in November of 2022. Bill 23 amended the Ontario Heritage Act, and one of the most significant changes was the introduction of a 2-year time limit on listed heritage properties. So this means that the city has until the end of 2024, so essentially 9 months from now, to designate listed heritage properties. Otherwise, these properties fall off the register and cannot be relisted for a 5-year period. And once a property is removed from the register, it ceases to have any legal protection against demolition or alterations from a heritage perspective. So essentially, in the context of Bill 23, designation is the only way to ensure the long-term protection of cultural heritage resources that are currently listed on the city's heritage register. Next slide, please. So why is it important to designate properties that have cultural heritage value? Protection of culturally significant properties is widely recognized as a public good throughout the world and has well-studied and documented benefits, including social benefits, such as conserving diverse cultural memories for present and future generations, conserving and building community and identity through a shared sense of history, and creating an attractive public realm that creates a unique sense of place. There are also environmental benefits to heritage conservation. So I believe it was Carl Elefante, the former president of the American Institute of Architects, that's a mouthful, that said that the greenest building is the building that is already built. So heritage conservation reduces waste and landfill from demolition. It conserves the embodied energy of existing constructions, and it reuses and recycles existing sites, buildings, and materials that have high durability. Heritage conservation also does have economic benefits. For example, heritage tourism. It also develops skilled jobs that lead to long-term equitable employment, supports regional economies, including local material suppliers, and it provides smaller scale, more affordable commercial spaces for local businesses. So these are all really great things for the local economy. In addition to these well-documented benefits, heritage conservation is also mandated and supported by all levels of provincial, regional, and municipal policy and legislation. And it has also been a long-standing priority for Richmond Hill Council. And finally, as I mentioned previously, within the context of Bill 23, designation under the Ontario Heritage Act is now the only tool that the city has to ensure the long-term protection of our significant cultural heritage resources. Next slide, please. So essentially, designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act allows the city to protect properties that have significant cultural heritage value and that embody Richmond Hill's history or legacy, stories, unique identity, and sense of place and community. Next slide, please. I also wanted to take a bit of time now to look at a few properties that have already been protected via individual designation under the Heritage Act, as a way to highlight how each one of these properties tells a unique story that contributes to Richmond Hill's legacy and identity. So again, just to clarify, these properties have already been designated. These are not being proposed today for designation. And heritage designation is not just about protecting the stories of grand citizens and major landmarks. It's about protecting the stories that are important to the community. And sometimes those stories are captured in quite modest buildings. So for example, in the slide that's up right now, the William Cooper House at 37 Arnold Crescent, which was built around 1860 by William Cooper and was rented out to various tradespeople over time. And this house shows us how tradespeople in early Richmond Hill Village would have lived. Or the Wilson Mowat House at 4 Elizabeth Street North, which was built by farm machinery inventor Asa Wilson in the 1870s and was later the home of celebrated Canadian author Farley Mowat in the 1940s. Or the Trench Carriage Works building at 10117 Yonge Street, which, as its name implies, originally housed the Trench Carriage Works, who were manufacturers of carriages and other horse-drawn vehicles, and were one of Richmond Hill's largest employers in the late 19th century. And also just to note, with the Trench Carriage Works building, like many other designated heritage buildings, it has seen numerous changes over time, as can be seen when you compare the archival image on the left of the screen to the current image on the right. But rather than detract from the building's cultural heritage value, these changes themselves can carry cultural heritage significance and tell a larger story about societal and economic shifts in Richmond Hill and beyond. For example, as you can see in these two side-by-side photographs, many of the changes to the building, such as the addition of storefronts at grade and alterations to window openings, were made when the building was converted from industrial to commercial and residential use in the early 20th century, when the growing popularity of automobiles made the carriage building industry obsolete. Next slide, please. I also think it might be helpful to address some common misconceptions about heritage designation and what designation actually means for property owners. So as a very general overview, heritage designation, like any other city planning policy or requirement that affects real property, is intended to protect something that is widely considered to be a public benefit. So in this sense, heritage designation can be thought of like a tree preservation bylaw or a right-of-way land conveyance. And like other planning requirements, heritage designation is intended to manage and guide, but not prevent changes to properties in the city. So to this end, heritage designation does not prevent development, alterations, or additions to property. It does not restrict or require a change to the use or occupancy of a property. It does not require a property transferred to the city, and it does not convert a property into a public or communal space. Next slide, please. So in order to ensure that we protect Richmond Hill's significant cultural heritage resources for present and future generations, we are seeking council support of our proposed property designations. And council would show this support by issuing what's called a notice of intention to designate the 10 properties that are being considered at today's COW meeting. And I want to stress here that all properties being proposed for designation have been rigorously researched using diverse archival sources and also evaluated for heritage significance using prescribed provincial criteria that are actually contained in the Ontario Heritage Act. And as a reminder, under the Ontario Heritage Act, anyone who opposes a property designation may formally object in writing after council states their intention to designate. Written objections with substantiated claims is a step that is built into the process under the Act to allow staff to consider and respond to any concerns with additional information or further research if necessary. Any formal objections will then be brought forward to council through a staff memo or report, at which point council may choose to withdraw or proceed with their intention to designate a property. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, in response to the timeline imposed by Bill 23, staff will be bringing high value and high risk properties forward for designation throughout the remainder of the year, with the first 10 properties coming forward for council's consideration at this morning's COW meeting. And in closing, I want to reiterate that heritage conservation through designation is about so much more than protecting individual buildings or their individual attributes. It's about documenting and preserving the stories that make Richmond Hill unique. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. Would anyone like to discuss this presentation? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. The planner, Julia, you had mentioned about properties cannot be relisted for 5 years after they fall off the registry. Are there any caveats with that? So in other words, is that only applicable if a property has an application against it? So this is complete. Okay, so
Yes.
I think I'm misunderstanding because I thought I heard something last week where it said that that was only applicable if a application now came forward for a property. We cannot all of a sudden say we want to register that property.
Through the chair. So that has to do with a designation of a property. So there's basically two separate levels of heritage properties. One is a listed property, which is really kind of the crux of the matter we're dealing with today. So listed properties, they've been flagged as potentially having cultural heritage value, but they haven't actually gone through the rigorous kind of research and evaluation process and formally designated under the Act. So with what's happened with Bill 23 is that all properties that are currently listed will be automatically dropped off the register at the end of this year. And then they can't be re-added for 5 years. However, with designation, we are still able to designate a property, just not list it. Does that answer your question?
It
It is
made it just
confusing.
as clear as mud, actually. So
Through the
So
chair, if it makes you feel
for an
any better.
example, let's say I'm a owner of a listed property, but it only has 2 of the 9 key elements for becoming a designated property. And so I don't expect that this will be picked up as one of the properties that would be looked at. However, so when it falls off at the end of this year, because it was just a listed property, what I'm hearing is that if at some future point during the next 5 years, the property owner did want to apply to have the property registered, you're saying they could not do that?
If the property owner wants to have it listed, which is kind of this just flagging it, they wouldn't be able to do that. If they wanted to designate it, which is again, this kind of, extra protection where you have to do the research, you have to identify the specific attributes that contribute to its value, they could designate the property if we thought that it met the criteria in the Act for designation.
Okay, so, yeah, okay, I think I get that. So it's a matter of what's not allowed during that 5 years is to relist, but you could get a designation if the criteria was met. Okay. On your last slide, in your conclusion, you said throughout the year, staff will bring forward high value, high risk properties that merit designation. Could you contextually just expand on what you mean by high risk?
Yeah, so, okay, so there are through the chair. There are 235 listed properties on the register. So that's far too many properties for us to do in-depth research into. So what we did was we created an evaluation matrix, kind of like a screening matrix that had different criteria. So some of those had to do with value, some of those had to do with risk. So when we were looking at the risk piece, we were looking at things like, is this close to an area that's really being redeveloped? Is this close to for example, like the Yonge Street corridor. Does the property look like it's, in kind of a state of disrepair where we think that they may come in for a demolition permit? Is the property on a much larger lot where, if we were a developer, we would look at this and say, oh, it's a pretty small house, very large lot. Maybe I could come in for a demolition application and, build some townhouses or a much larger home on the lot. So those kinds of things we were looking at when we were evaluating what we considered to be risk to a property.
Okay, thank you very much through the chair. That answers my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Councillor Silovitz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. My thanks to our heritage team for bringing these matters forward and for a very good presentation. Thank you, Julia. I just have a couple of questions to you, Madam Chair, if I may. Just to make things really clear for anybody who's not perhaps on the committee or anybody who's not perhaps sure of exactly what this means by the end of the year. So could you please explain a little bit further about the process that we are going to go through here? So we've gone to HRH. HRH has now recommended certain things to the Committee of the Whole. Committee of the Whole then goes to Council. What happens then?
Okay, through the chair. So if council is to state their intention to designate, so that would be the next step. If COW endorses it, it goes to council. Council states their intention to designate a property. And then the city has to issue a notice of intention to designate to the property owner. And at that point, there is a 30-day objection period. So if a property owner receives this notice of intention to designate and they say, I don't want my property designated, then they can submit a formal objection. And then staff would have to respond to that objection via a memo or a staff report, bring it back to council. Council would then decide whether they want to proceed with designation or if they would like to withdraw the designation. And if they decide to proceed with it, then they would have to pass a bylaw at a council meeting. And then once that happens, there's another 30-day appeal period. And during that appeal period, if a property owner wants to, still objects to it and wants to pursue it further, then it gets appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And so that the matter then gets resolved through the OLT.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So to clarify, there's still a period of time here that anybody who is listed or is going to be designated through this is going to have a period of time in which to have further discussions and to object. With regards to the OLT, through you, Madam Chair, should a resident, an owner of a property that we wish to designate, like the 10 here today, wish to object, and if it actually goes to OLT, do you know what their responsibilities are at OLT? Do they have to hire their own planner? Do they have to hire their own heritage planner in order to bring forward the appropriate heritage assessments? Like what is the onus on the owner of the property? Through you, Madam Chair. If you know.
Through you, Madam Chair. At that point, it would be up to the property owner to decide how they want to formally object or legally object at the OLT. It would be at their discretion.
Okay, so thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So there is the legal side to it as well. A lawyer can also be hired. Okay, thank you very much. So that's, as with anything that goes to the OLT, there are major expenses that a resident or a property owner can incur. Thank you. My last question to you, Madam Chair, is could you speak more to alterations of the original property and how you, as heritage planners, our department, and the Ontario Heritage Act considers alterations done to properties as not changing it to the even exterior, as not changing it to the extent that it no longer complies, it doesn't even meet one of the 9? Through you, Madam Chair.
Yes, through the chair. So in terms of alterations, I don't believe that there's anything in the Ontario Heritage Act specifically that deals with, at kind of the threshold of alterations beyond which a property can't be considered for designation anymore. It's kind of at professional discretion, really, and we use the criteria that are in the Ontario Heritage Act. So if, we look at a property and we still think it's legible, so does it still, when you look at it, does it still look like it's a building that was built in the 1890s, right? Yes, maybe some of those features have been replaced over time. Sometimes they've been removed entirely. As long as the property is really still legible and still has the character of, a property that was built whenever it was originally built. We do still consider that to have what's called design integrity. And yeah, so I mean, certainly alterations can be made to properties and features can be replaced, updated, and we can still look at it and say, this still looks like it merits designation. It's still, is representative of a design style.
Thank you, Julia. Just want to follow up through you, Madam Chair. So, in other words, going to the OLT, the Ontario Land Tribunal, which any planning application goes to should it be objected to or denied by council, what does that means that OLT becomes a third party, right? A third party independent, because we as the city are saying something, the resident as the landowner is saying something, the two do not meet, and we cannot find some kind of compromise. So OLT, the chair and the hearing, serves as a third party independent opinion. Is that correct to you, Madam Chair?
Through the chair, yes, that would be correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted a little bit of clarity on that, Thank you very much again for all that you do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next, we have Regional and Local Councillor DePolo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And perhaps you've answered, I missed it, but I just one question about the process. So notice of intention to designate comes to committee of the whole, and then we make a decision at council. And then if the property owner objects to that intention by council, our staff evaluates the merits of their objection and it comes back to council. Okay. Then if council still chooses to designate, then we formally designate or council. Again, I guess it's still an intention to designate subject to appeal, or it's a designate. We designate.
So through the chair. So what you'll be doing today is basically stating your intention to designate. And then it'll go to council. Council will formally adopt that intention. Then the 30-day objection period begins. If should there be an objection, we will prepare a staff report and bring it back to council, at which state you will either withdraw the intention or pursue the intention. It is still an intention to designate. A property is only designated by bylaw. So once the bylaw is passed, that is when the property is truly designated.
Okay, so if we do pass a notice of intention to designate and there's no objection, we're still going to have a bylaw coming forward?
So through the
Either way, a council will again make a decision whether or not to formally designate.
through the chair, yes, through a bylaw that we will bring forward.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And well, just curious, I don't know what the Heritage Act speaks to this, but does it have to be 100 years old? Is it 1924? Is there a demarcation age? So if something was built in the 50s but significant to the community? Okay, here. Okay, thank you.
Through the chair. Yes, there's nothing in the criteria in the Ontario Heritage Act that says, it has to be built before a certain date. It really has to do with value. So you could designate a modernist building, you could designate a brutalist building. If it was designed by an important architect and you think it has significance, you can certainly do that.
No limit on that. Like
No limit at all.
Oak Ridge Community Center we built 14 years ago that we could decide to designate it?
Through the chair, yes, if you thought it.
If it meets the
if it
criteria, and I
yeah,
understand
If
that,
it meets
yeah.
the criteria, then yeah, you could.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And next, Mayor West.
Okay, thank you so much. So thank you, Councillor DePaula, for asking about the process. That was one of my questions. I just wonder if you could elaborate a little bit. I find this frustrating because we are where we are today because of Bill 23. And if we weren't in that position, then we wouldn't be doing this. Can you just elaborate a little bit on like what's the difference between what would have happened or what is now happening because of Bill 23 and maybe the reason that I think I probably use the word scrambling to some degree to put extra resources into this because of the time.
Yes, through the chair. I can speak to that a little bit. So the old system, which we were all very used to, and all municipalities had really gotten used to this system of having the two-tier, like listing and designation. And so the way it used to happen was that properties could remain listed for however long. I used to work at the City of Toronto. There were properties on the register that were added in the 70s and have never been designated. And what would happen is, you'd only designate when there was an application to demolish or to, for change, a development application. So that allowed municipalities to really focus resources on what was important, right? Because what we're doing right now is we're kind of like hypothesizing like which of these properties are at risk, right? The way it was before is that you would actually know because they'd come in with an application. You'd say at risk. Okay, do we want to designate? So that was the way it used to work. But now because all of our listed properties are going to be removed from the register at the end of the year, we will have no control. Someone could come in for a demolition application, January 1st, 2025, and we will have no ability to say, do we want to designate, right? To protect it. Yeah.
So because of this, I mean, the process, so that the ability for us to provide a sober second thought on the value of that property to the community will be gone for 180, whatever it is, properties, with the exception of the small number that we're going to be designating. Right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, yes, you can designate a property after the fact, but there are no tools in the toolbox anymore after this to say that's a really important heritage building. It does have heritage significance, but we cannot provide any sort of mechanism to prevent that from being demolished, for example.
Through the chair, yeah, that's correct. And in fact, another change that came out as a result of Bill 23 to the Ontario Heritage Act is that if a property is not already listed and a planning application comes in for it, we are unable to designate it. So the province has taken away our ability to, as they say, reactively designate properties. So yeah, there's no other mechanism for us to control that.
All right, I'll add that to my list of things that concern me about Bill 23. But I think, the thing is about that is that, character of neighborhoods is very much defined in a number of places in our communities by these types of heritage buildings. I hear it from people all the time. And, I really, when Bill 23 came out, I realized that this wasn't the very first thing that people were concerned about, but I predicted that we would come to this at some point, and here we are. So I worry about that because, character of our neighborhoods is something that's really, really important to the people that live in our community. It really does, in large part, define us. But so I understand why we're at where we're at, and I want to be clear that this is not where we are today is not of our own doing. This is, anyway. One of the values of being designated, I'm not sure you really spoke about this a lot in your presentation, is because I've been on HRH for most of the years I've been on council actually, is the possibility once a building is designated to apply for and be granted a grant that would help to offset any additional costs that it would cost to, say, replace windows, but in a way, like in a historic house, it'll probably cost a little bit more. Can we talk a little bit about, can you just give us an insight as to how much money do we give out every year? What are the kinds of things that we give it out for? And what is the process to get it? And lastly, what's the uptake on that grant process like?
Through to you, Madam Chair. We have a matching grant program that provides the owners of designated properties with up to $5,000 per year. They can apply for as many years as they want and apply. That's usually what we encourage them to do. So sometimes they have larger projects that they want to do. They want to repair all of the windows in their property. And that's going to cost more than $10,000. So they can phase it in. They do 2-3 windows one year, 2-3 windows the next year, and really maximize the amount of grant money they can get. So there is no limit to how many grant applications they can provide. These grant funds can be used towards any sort of repair work, restoration work. If they have a leaky roof, their grant money can be used towards that. If they need to repaint any heritage attribute that is falling into disrepair, the money can be used towards that. If any proposed or potential property owners who are going to will own the potentially designated properties want to find more information about what the Heritage Grant entails, we have our Heritage Grant terms of reference online, and they can provide more information there through there. In terms of the popularity of our grant program, we tend to max out the funds every year. And the last few years, we actually received more applications than we have grant funds for. So it's unfortunate that we have to turn away some property owners. So it's quite a popular program.
Okay, so one of the things that I'd like us to do with that, because that is an important program, I think, that it doesn't change the universe for people who own designated houses, but it helps. And I would like us to see, and this is a discussion for another day, I get it, but I just wanted to throw it out there. I think inflation has caused a problem with that maximum of $5,000. I mean, $5,000, buys you a couple of pine boards nowadays, it seems. So I think we need to look at that. But I think given the new landscape that we're now going to be under Bill 23, I think we really need to be looking at how easy and effective is it for us to be administering that program? How much money do we have available in it? And make it as simple and streamlined for the people who do have designated houses to apply for it and get it, right? Because we are trying to help them with the fact that they're helping us, right? Is there also a possibility, or do any other municipalities have other grant funding from other places for our grant program, or for a grant program like that? Like, is that unheard of?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, some municipalities do have a property tax how would you say rebate program? Yes. We have researched that in the past, and we found that the grant program is the better way forward.
Yeah, that's not what I meant. I mean, can we get grants from other government levels of government for this type of thing, or other sources to fund our grant program?
Through you, Madam Chair, in the past, there was a Trillium grant program that the province did provide. That's been put on hold indefinitely. So I'm not familiar with any grant sources, unfortunately.
Okay, I'd like to talk about that at some point. All right. I think that's all. I have some comments, but I think that's all the questions I have at this point. As I said, it is frustrating to have the process be like this. This is not the way we've done things in the past, and it's been difficult enough as it is. But I think this is putting us under the gun a lot, and I think that it's making it more difficult for us to administer the process the way that we would like to. But unfortunately, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And anyone else have any questions about the presentation? No? Thank you very much to our folks in Heritage. Could I have a motion? A motion to receive the report? Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Did you want to say something?
Actually, I was looking to see if there was going to be a second round, because I did want to add something to what was mentioned before.
Are we discussing this later? Is this just regarding the report?
Thank you. To the chair, no, there is no report. This is just a general presentation.
Oh,
It's
the
not
presentation.
connected to individual items. It was a general informational presentation.
So it's a second round.
If council wishes, yes.
All right, over to you, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I just want to follow up on the question that the mayor was asking in regards to the grant process. The funding, is that only specific to attributes that were deemed designated for a given property? Because, you know, a lot of properties will have been altered in some way, shape, or form, additions, things like that. So when you designate these properties, you're typically designating specific attributes. Am I not correct on that? And then would the grant funding only be applicable to what has been deemed designated? That's my question.
Through you, Madam Chair, the grants are used for any repair work or projects that will help preserve the heritage attributes. So the thing that is being repaired may not necessarily be a heritage attribute itself. Like, for example, if a roof is leaking, if that roof isn't repaired, that moisture is going to get into the house and may eventually impact the heritage attributes of the building itself. So it's generally it is used towards heritage attributes, but it could be used towards any component of a building that requires repairs that, if otherwise would not be repaired, would impact the heritage attributes of the building.
Thank you. Through the chair, that answers my question.
Thank you. And the mayor had another question.
Sorry, I think it is appropriate then to be making some comments based on what I heard from the clerk. That's a good point. This is a presentation unto itself, but I'll just be very brief. I really think it's important for members of council. I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and to realize that, you know, like anything we do around here, this is an attempt to balance the needs of the community as a whole and the needs of the individual property owners. And not to say that anything we do in any municipal environment is perfect, but we're doing the best that we can to balance it under the circumstances that unfortunately are not making this easier. But having said that, I also think, you know, in the thought that I've been giving to this is that, you know, all properties have restrictions. I mean, owning a piece of property comes with a suite of things you can and can't do on the property. And not to say that any additional items that come with a heritage designation are the same as any other restrictions, zoning restrictions, use of property restrictions, so on. But, you know, they are kind of in the same bucket. So again, that gets back to we're trying to balance the needs of the community and the needs of the landowner. But having said that, one of the things that I do hear periodically about, you know, the argument against wanting to be designated is that it's an extra layer of bureaucracy that you have to go through if you were ever to do something significant to the property. And I think that it has to be significant. I mean, you know, not everything that you're going to do to a property would trigger that. But I think that what we really need to do, again, just to add to the other suggestion I made, was that we really need to be looking at streamlining that process as much as we possibly can, more so than we've done even in the past. Because first of all, it's not professional developers that are coming to us with a team of architects and professionals that are asking for these changes. It's individual homeowners, right? It's just the regular people in our neighborhood, so to speak. So we really need to be able to give those people an extra level of holding their hand and helping them through the process, because they don't have the resources or the knowledge to do it. And the second thing is, I think that you know, we need to advertise, and I know we've done some of that with this presentation, but I think after the dust settles for this, it would be really great if we could sit down and have seminars for people that have designated homes and make sure that they really fully understand the lay of the land and what's possible, what's not, what's available to them, and how we can help them. Because I think, you know, it's not to say we shouldn't have done this at other times, but now that the landscape has solidified, let's say, like the number of designated properties that we have after this is finished is probably it. You know, we may or may not get a lot more designated properties in the coming years. And I think we need to start concentrating on the subset that we have rather than, and I'm not saying like the thing about having the inventory is that there was a lot of properties on the inventory that ultimately wouldn't get designated. And we see that when we see a Heritage Richmond Hill recommendation coming to us. But now that we've kind of eliminated that kind of noise and we know what we're dealing with now, I think we need to spend some time and resources with the owners of those properties and help them to understand fully the possibilities and frankly celebrate the value that those buildings bring to the community. So and perhaps even do whatever we can in our power. And I know that that's limited at trying to get people to understand the ones that used to be on the inventory to continue to maintain the properties, because it sure is a value to the community.
Thank you. And I believe that's it. So thank you very much for your presentation. Next, we didn't, do we have, Councillor Thompson, can we please vote on the motion to receive the presentation? With thanks. Thank you. Okay. Next, we have a presentation from Maria Flores, Director, Policy Planning, regarding the feasibility of meeting provincial housing targets with Bill 23. Thank you so much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning,
Sure.
Madam Chair and members of council. For today's presentation, I'll be highlighting key points from the staff report in item 11.6, along with an update on city planning initiatives stemming from Bill 23. Next slide, please. So in response to the member motion to report back, I'll be touching on the three main areas: the provincial housing target, the Building Faster Fund, and how the city continues to support housing. Next slide, please. As you may recall, as part of Bill 23, Richmond Hill was assigned a target of 27,000 new residential units by 2031. Through our official plan update, Richmond Hill City Structure for Growth and Development was planned to accommodate population forecasts to 2041, so 30 years out. While this volume of units had already been planned for based on provincial and regional projections, with this target, a faster pace of growth is now expected, hence the name of Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act. To put it in perspective, when translated into population numbers, the 27,000 housing unit target represents an acceleration of growth almost double the forecasted rate, taking what was expected to happen in the next 20 years down to the first 10 years. Next slide, please. One of the questions we're often asked is, can we meet this target by 2031? Based on the information we have available, the answer is yes. Recent planning data indicates that 26,219 new housing units are currently being contemplated in Richmond Hill at various stages of the planning application process. Combined with additional residential units in the neighborhoods and future applications, it is very likely that the city will approve close to or equal to 27,000 units within the next 7 years by 2031. This also tells us that there is enough planned housing supply within our settlement area to accommodate this target. Next slide, please. To go back to the council motion, staff were asked to report back on where in Richmond Hill the 27,000 units are planned to be built by 2031. The answer is in the centers and corridors. The OP directs the majority of future growth in the planned intensification centers and corridors, mainly along Yonge Street and Highway 7, where we have mixed-use areas served by higher order transit. Our current planning data suggests that the city's newly updated structure can accommodate this growth. Next slide. As outlined in the report, a look at current planning applications in the pipeline shows that compared to past approvals, the proportion of new residential units located in the centers and corridors is now trending higher than in other areas of the city. Approximately 72% of proposed residential units being contemplated in the planning process are located in the centers and corridors. This tells us that the city structure established in 2010 and recently updated with expanded permissions is working. Richmond Hill is transforming into a more urbanized municipality and is becoming a complete community with more and more residents living closer to transit and amenities. Next slide, please. The next part of the presentation focuses on the Building Faster Fund, or BFF, which is a provincial 3-year, $1.2 billion fund to reward municipalities that deliver on their housing targets. To qualify for this fund, a municipality must submit a council-endorsed housing pledge, which we've done, respond to the provincial survey on the Housing Affordability Task Force recommendations, which we have also done, and meet or exceed 80% of their assigned annual target for 2023, 2024, and 2025. Next slide, please. Richmond Hill's assigned target of 27,000 units represents 1.8% of the province's overall goal of 1.5 million homes by 2031. That rate is used to come up with the city's portion of the province-wide annual goal for each of the 3 years of the fund's lifespan. In 2023, Richmond Hill's annual target was 1,980 units, or at the 80% threshold, 1,584 units. To determine whether a municipality has met its annual target, the province is measuring progress through CMHC data on new home construction starts and additional residential units, as well as data on long-term care beds from the Ministry of Long-Term Care. Next slide, please. To address the next question from the council motion, is it feasible to achieve our annual housing targets? Based on the Building Faster Fund criteria, the short answer is no. The province has confirmed that the city did not meet its 2023 target and is therefore not eligible to receive a portion of the BFF for that year. In York Region, 6 of the 8 municipalities that were assigned a target did not meet their threshold for 2023, so we're not alone. Based on historical building permit data and the time lag between planning approvals and construction, the city is unlikely to achieve its annual housing target in 2024 and 2025. Next slide. So why are these targets difficult for us to achieve? The first main reason is that the performance measure the province uses does not provide the full picture. CMHC housing construction starts in any given year are not an accurate reflection of housing units approved by the city within that same year. The time lag between when a development project receives planning approval to building permit issuance and the start of construction can take several years. More complex multi-residential development tends to take even longer, something that Richmond Hill is dealing with as we transition from suburban to urban. Hence, one size does not fit all. The second main reason is that municipalities do not build homes or houses. This is a sentiment noted by many municipalities as well as broad-scale organizations such as AMO and the Ontario Big City Mayors Forum. Once planning applications are approved by a municipality, when those units will be constructed is out of our control. To illustrate this point, as of December 2023, York Region had an approved supply of 66,000 units. Development applications within the region that received approval more than 3 years ago were reviewed, confirming that over 38% of approved applications with committed or reserved servicing allocation had not yet proceeded to the building permit stage. Next slide, please. Despite substantial investments and improvements made by the city to facilitate housing, the long-term benefits of those initiatives will not immediately be realized nor captured in the BFF timeframe. The city's housing target and associated housing pledge were established in the early part of 2023. Not enough time for results to be reflected in year-end construction starts, which are more indicative of planning approvals obtained several years ago. A more accurate municipal performance measure would focus on elements that a municipality can control. For example, the number of residential units approved in a calendar year, processing times as a result of streamlining, or policies or initiatives that resulted in an increased number of housing units. These are actually more reflective of planning activity in a municipality. Next slide, please. Despite the challenge of not meeting the province's threshold for funding eligibility, Richmond Hill will continue to grow and attract more housing as it urbanizes and intensifies along its centers and corridors, especially once the subway is built. Even before Bill 23, Richmond Hill has been proactive in its efforts to plan for growth and development, streamline the development approval process, and monitor its own housing supply. The city is committed to implementing initiatives under its housing target pledge, so it can be ready to accommodate and facilitate more housing, including affordable housing in the future. Next slide. In fact, the city's efforts have been recognized through the granting of $31 million from the federal government through its Housing Accelerator Fund. Also known as the HAF, this is a 3-year, $4 billion federal funding program to create more supply of housing at a faster pace. Out of 540 applicants, Richmond Hill was one of 179 communities that received the HAF grant. In fact, we were one of 60 large urban municipalities nationwide that were awarded funds from this program. As part of our HAF agreement, the city is implementing a housing action plan, which contains a series of housing-related initiatives over the next 3 years. Next slide, please. The next few slides provide an update on some of the ongoing initiatives the city has been undertaking to support housing from a policy and program perspective. Through the OP update and subsequently the comprehensive zoning bylaw, 4 center-specific OPAs were adopted by council to provide a policy framework for the highest intensification outside of Richmond Hill Centre. A study to look at 4 units on a property as of right and up to 4 stories in MTSAs has also been initiated to facilitate gentle intensification. Implementation of our affordable housing strategy actions is also ongoing. For example, a community improvement plan study is underway to develop a grant program to incentivize affordable housing and sustainable design features into new development. The background study is now complete and the consultation will begin in the spring. Following the statutory process, recommendations on how to establish the CIP will be brought forward in the fall in anticipation of implementing the CIP program in 2025. The city also has a municipal surplus property review underway to determine a suitable site that could potentially be used for affordable housing in partnership with York Housing. Next slide, please. Other anticipated work includes a peer review to assess the viability of inclusionary zoning in Richmond Hill and the development of an affordable housing concierge pilot program anticipated for 2025. To address other Bill 23 legislative changes, a review to amend the parkland dedication bylaw is underway. And as you know, the city has embarked on a heritage designation strategy to designate high priority listed properties before the December 31st deadline. Next slide. From a process perspective, this table outlines the status of process improvements and tools such as implementation of the collaborative application process to provide upfront clarity and increase efficiency and the quality of submissions in the development review process. Next slide. Improvements to the EnerGov development application tracking system are mostly in place, with the customer service portal allowing for online submissions, as well as the data migration from Palace to EnerGov scheduled for Q2 of this year. The KPMG end-to-end development services review recommendations are being implemented with the establishment of standard operating procedures and prioritization of remaining recommendations to be initiated through 2024. Next slide. Continuous improvement through digitization, streamlining of the development review and approval process, and establishment of additional planning tools are also being developed to expedite housing approvals. Next slide, please. This chart provides a snapshot of planning activity in the last 6 months of 2023, as well as the totals of the year for the year. It breaks down the proposed and approved residential development applications by housing type. And as you can see, there's definitely a shift towards more compact, higher density forms of housing, such as townhouses and apartment buildings. Next slide, please. This table identifies the number of housing units by type that were being processed through the newly established CAP process in Q3 and Q4 of 2023. As you can see, the intake of proposed units increased towards the end of the year, and we will be able to monitor this trend as more quarterly data becomes available. Next slide. And finally, this table shows the total number of building permits issued over the last 3 years by dwelling unit type. As you can see, townhouses trended upwards along with ARUs since the city's ARU policy and bylaw was instituted in 2021. Other dwelling types show a decline in the numbers, particularly apartments and condos, but it's important to remember that the building permits issued in these years are reflective of development projects that received planning approvals several years prior. Based on our current intake of planning applications, we can expect that the number of building permits to be issued for apartments and condos will increase substantially in the coming years. Next slide. In summary, according to the growth forecasts and a review of planning applications that we currently have, Richmond Hill is on track to meet its housing target of 27,000 residential units by 2031, and the majority of those units can be accommodated in the centers and corridors. Based on the performance measure used for the Building Faster Fund, Richmond Hill is not likely to meet its annual housing target in the next 2 years to qualify for that fund. Despite this challenge, however, current planning activity indicates that Richmond Hill is growing and transforming into a more urbanized municipality. As market forces change and the subway advances north to Richmond Hill, the volume and pace of growth will inevitably increase. The updated land use planning policies and process improvements the city is undertaking now will better prepare Richmond Hill to respond to future housing demand and effectively shape that growth into complete communities beyond the 3-year BFF timeframe. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps, excuse me, the city is committed to working together with all stakeholders, both internal and external, to achieve our housing targets. We remain committed to dedicating the staff resources needed, excuse me, to improve planning policies, processes, and streamline approvals. And we will continue to monitor provincial announcements and our own planning data to determine the impact on our housing objectives. That concludes the end of my presentation, and staff are available here to help answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And who on council would like to ask questions regarding this report? Councillor DePaulo. All right, we'll start with Councillor DePaulo.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm happy to move a motion to receive this report. I was the member who requested the report. I'm pleased with the amount of work that was done, the quick turnaround, that this has come forward, and I think it's clear from the report that we really have to do a dive into this and do as much work as possible to meet these housing targets. Now, when we first took a pledge here on this term of council that we would meet our housing targets, we pledged that we would meet the absolute target in 10 years, the 27,000, and this interim process of rewarding those that are getting housing starts today for approvals they did 3 to 5 years ago is really unfair and arbitrary, I believe. I do want to ask a question. So have we lost that money, or will we get it up? Is it just you get an advance on your overall amount of funding from the province if you hit your targets in a given year? Are we out money if we hit the target ultimately at the end of 10?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's not clear how the province intends to distribute the money for the entire 3 years. What we do know is that money is being distributed for 2023 for those that have met that target that was set. We've also heard from other municipalities that did meet their target that they had an extra step that they had to do in terms of submitting more financial management steps and numbers. So it seems to vary between the municipalities. It's not clear to us if any of that portion is being held for a later time, but it looks like they're just dealing with 2023 in a discrete way.
Okay. Well, I intend to spend the next 6-7 years trying to right what I believe is unfair. You can't. This is the first time I've ever seen provincial funding be tied to performance, and it's not our performance; it's the market performance, but it's tied in this case to actions that were taken prior to the act coming into effect. So I think that was unfair but we will deal with it as it comes. And I'm so pleased to hear our staff that believes that we are on target and we can hit that target. But the fact that we're so close to almost, if things go well, we're expecting to be right about where that target is. We really have to dig in, be very careful with every application, especially those that are intending to build right away. The other grievance I have with the province is, the late Mayor Barrow and I worked very hard to get a major transit station area at Gormley Go Station approved here and at the region, and the province has taken that density away from us. They chose for whatever reason, they haven't outlined it, and of course the bill hasn't passed. But as of second reading, it appears, and I've been told by the ministry that nothing will change on third reading. It appears they've taken what would have been 3,000 to 4,000 units built in the next 4 to 5 years, ready to go. We've got the infrastructure there. The sewers are at Leslie and Stouffville. The province has built the Gormley Go Station and the Bloomington Station, which will never see houses around it. And we were very careful at the region to only delineate the urban boundary and not go 1 foot into the protected countryside and the other protected areas of the Oak Ridge Marine Act. So I think that has to be a consideration when we made a plan. The York region passed a plan in 2022 that would have given us a significant number of units, and the province, they have chose to take those units away from us. And well, they're doing it right now. They are in the process, and that's going to. So I hope this council can still have some consideration when those applicants come forward, because the Islamic Society of York Region, for one, has 1,000 units ready to, they're raring to go, and I'm not sure how that'll be treated by our staff given the change in the provincial mandate. So we are. I'll just say this. In 2023, we passed the Richmond Hill Center, which was probably the most aggressive plan for new housing anywhere in North America. In 2022, East Gwillimbury was the fastest growing municipality in Canada, but in 2023, it didn't meet its targets and got no funding. There's something not right when that's the case. The way we're being evaluated is not right, at least in the short term. But I'm really pleased that our staff has a plan, that we're all working together, and that at the end of the day we can meet this pledge. And it's not as chair of our official plan update, it says the budget chair that I have these concerns for our financial security if we don't get what amounts to, as we were told by our treasurer, almost $200 million at stake here. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Councillor Silvitz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Director Flores, for your excellent presentation and report. It makes it very clear of where we are. And I want to thank Regional Councillor De Paula for his words. I think that unfair is a word. There's other words I would use, but we can sit with unfair for now. If I may ask through you, Madam Chair, if you can tell us, Director Flores, at what point in the planning process are those units counted? Are they counted when the building permit is issued, or are they counted when the application is finished, approved, or are they counted at the end of construction? Because there are many times that buildings don't get built, that change of ownership, funding falls through. I have one property in Ward 5, massive property, that has been sitting there with an OMB approval for 14 years and nothing's been done. And we have absolutely no control over that. So through you, Madam Chair, can you better define that timeline so that we know exactly what our end game is here to satisfy the province?
Through you, Madam Chair. If you're referring to counting as per the Building Faster Fund.
Yes.
Okay. What they largely use is construction starts that CMHC actually monitors and keeps track of on a monthly basis. That means the foundation is poured and dried. For a multi-residential development, what we've heard is also a first level has to be up. So that's quite an advanced stage beyond what we have control over. And the example that I used in the presentation from the numbers that the region was able to review, it looked at the lag between approvals already committed for servicing, but then a pause before they apply to the building permit stage. What CMHC housing starts is even beyond that stage. They've already dug the hole, they've poured the foundation, it's dry, they're ready to build. So those are areas that we just really don't have control over.
Thank you, Director Flores. Through you, Madam Chair, that's our biggest problem. And it is just something that I believe we need to say as much as possible publicly. And we need to explain to our residents as well, who may be concerned. Well, we were promised money, but we didn't get it. So that's something that I also believe in, as much as what Mayor West was saying in the previous presentation, we need to make sure that our public or our homeowners of heritage homes know exactly what the process is. This is very similar, and it's very difficult from our perspective to issue that information. So I just want to say in closing, Madam Chair, that I believe, and in my discussions with many, that the pressure and the stress that the province has put us under through Bill 23 is insufferable. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Regional and Local Councillor Chan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, staff, for making a presentation. It's certainly showing very clearly, in particular, that I appreciate all the presentation numbers, tables, because any good policy, in my view, has to be truly supported by data, not just driven from certain things that not based on necessary evidence. And it's pretty clear and obvious that Richmond Hill is not, and actually a number of other municipalities of York Region are not really given a fair assessment in the sense of it all comes down to definitions, sources of the data, where it's coming from. And my colleague who spoke before me already touched on that, and Director Flores, and you touch on that as well. And like what I said to yesterday at the committee, when Director Lee, Treasurer, presenting information on capital funding information, we can only do what we can control in the city. And I'm not going to belabor about a number of things that we cannot control in terms of getting shovel on the ground. I mean, I'm sure my colleagues and I, we would be happy to put a shovel on the ground if we are able to do so, but it's the building industry. So having said that, I'm particularly interested in one of the slides is showing, actually in the staff report as well, showing the other, I guess, 6 municipalities, well, we are one of them, are not meeting the target through Madam Chair, to the extent that our planning staff are aware. Would there be some kind of, I understand our mayor already responded to the minister, Paul Calandra, in terms of pointing out some of the maybe unfairness, as well as really not trying to compare apples with apples rather than apples and oranges. To the extent on that note, from the planning community within that other York Region municipalities, is there any attempt or indication it could be a joint front? Because unity is important in the sense that not just Richmond Hill's voice, but 6 municipalities out of York Region having that voice. So that's a question for you, Madam Chair.
Through the chair, yes, certainly there are a lot of discussions happening in the planning community, particularly among York Region municipalities. There is a forum where planning commissioners and directors actually meet every month. This is a very common frustration for them. Others are taking reports or memos to council as well and looking at the numbers. very similar discussions all around. And there is been discussion too of perhaps having the region coordinate something that is a consolidated position towards the province. I can't make any promises because that's at their level, but certainly there's interest there.
Thank you. Well, I guess in terms of the positive news, so to speak, particularly that encouraging to see both in the slide presentation as well as the report that City of Richmond Hill is actually would on the path of meeting that target. It's just that in terms of eligibility for that $400 million a year, a share of that may not be really realized based on the provincial imposed formula that they have been using. Having said that, and my colleague earlier has pointed out, in a sense that both Richmond Hill, Markham, and Vaughan, where the Young Corridor, where the subway will be coming, there's thousands of units, whether it's on Young and Steeles, Young and Wall Orchard in Thornhill area, as well as our Young and Several Center. If I understand it correctly, and through you, Madam Chair, maybe get a confirmation from our director for us here, those units that the province, when they allows transit-oriented communities, would add 40,000 units, bring so many people in there. Those are not factored in because we don't have information. Is that correct, Madam Chair? The TOCs, yeah.
Oh, okay, yes. Okay, so with reference to the numbers in Richmond Hill Center, they wouldn't have been measured because they're not construction starts. By the time the infrastructure and the building stage happens, it's going to be a few years out, and that's normal for something of that magnitude and scale, but it's simply not going to be factored into this 3-year timeframe for the Building Faster Fund.
Thank you. So my final word is that what we have projected, the planning slide projected of the population that Richmond Hill would get to in 2041 for the benefit, if I can use that term, of Bill 23, we will get to that by 2031. It seems to be that's what I might take away from this. Thank you. I'm supporting motion to receive with thanks.
Thank you. And anyone else? I see. Oh, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you through the chair. I'd just like to try and get a little more information about some of the things that we have done to try and incentivize the development community to move forward. So I believe that we've pretty much done everything that the province has asked us to do. Yet we're being measured on a metrics that really we have no control over. But the things that we did have control over, such as removing the development charges and so forth to try and incentivize the development community, it seems to me that the development community is not being measured on those things. So they will still receive those benefits, yet we still have this lag in building. Has there been anything being done or said to try and address that?
Through the chair, at the staff level, we've implemented what we can from both a process and policy perspective. Lots of streamlining, digitization, process realignment, and staffing realignments to accommodate this more accelerated pace and direction that we've received. But in terms of holding feet to the fire on the development side, that's really not something we can regulate on our own. That's up to the upper levels of government.
I through you, the chair, I do appreciate the answer. I guess what I'm maybe looking at is maybe it's something that you're going to need to add to your list, is that we've done everything to incentivize the development community to move. And when they're not doing it, yet they're still reaping the benefits of certain programs that were put in place, I don't see where that's fair, that we get penalized, we don't get the money because they're not building. It just makes no sense to me. So I'll leave that to you through the chair. Mr. Mayor, you can add that to your list. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a protocol question. If I want to say something, but there's a second round, do I go to the second round first? I go first. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I don't know if you can answer this question, but based on your, can you make a well-educated guess? If this council passed a motion that there was an end time to an approval, so if you don't get shovels in the ground within a certain number of years, less than 14, would that help, do you think? Facilitate more building and get the show on the road?
Good morning. So through a number of initiatives that we've reviewed, and I think it was actually brought here at one point for a use it or sunset clause, if you will. Staff have done a preliminary review of that as a tool to help incentivize development. And we really actually don't have legislative authority under the Planning Act to do that. And there's also consequences to that in terms of the administration of that as well. So we have looked at of that as a possibility. One thing that we are kind of currently reviewing as part of one of our many initiatives that we're trying to ensure that we are making sure that we're in place to have development occur is look at our servicing allocation policies that would allow for kind of a use it or lose it kind of opportunity there so that they lose their allocation if they don't use it within a certain time frame. And that's something that's coming forward in short order.
Thank you. And the other question I have is, can we meet you say we can meet our 27,000 new units without developing the previous MTSA in Oak Ridges? That wasn't part of the equation, or was it?
Through the chair, oh, you are the chair. Yes, what we've planned for did not include that MTSA because it was identified as a future MTSA in the regional official plan before Bill 150 removed it. So that wasn't part of the projections that were factored into the planning and the official plan update.
So we can meet our 27,000 new units in the next 8-10 years without putting higher density permissions in the Gormley area as previously offered with the MTSA.
Essentially, yes, based on the current planning data, it looks like we're on track for that and it can be contained within the settlement area.
And sorry, just to clarify, I was a little foggy. If we meet, so we don't meet 2023, we don't meet 2024, but we meet 2025 or 2026. Obviously, to meet that, we would have met all the other years previously. Did you say we do get to collect the money that we missed? Like for us to meet 2026, we would have had to have met all the other years previously, really, maybe not on time, but eventually not on the province's timeline. Did you say we do or don't get to collect sort of the missed money that we didn't get because those targets weren't met on exactly the right timeline?
Mm-hmm. Through you, I don't believe, I could be wrong, but I haven't heard anything to state that they will be back rewarding based on previous years. The timeframe for the BFF, as we know it, is 2023 to 2025. I don't believe that they are planning to, well, they haven't stated that they're continuing it after those years. That may be possible, but at this point, they're only looking at those 3 years.
So obviously to meet the last part of the decade, you would have had to have met the first part of the decade eventually, but there's going to be no reward for that as things stand now.
The way the Building Faster Fund is structured, it's only focused on those 3 years.
Okay, thank you. And second round, we have Regional and Local Councillor DePaula.
Hey, and thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks again for the report. I'm not saying that the overall target is unfair or arbitrary or unachievable, and the staff report confirms that we're expected to be very close. But I think we have to be really diligent to make sure, because if anything does go wrong, we've got some major projects that if they're put on hold for reasons outside of our control, We've really got to get down to work. We have to get down to work in the next 2 years. When an application comes in, we have our public hearing. And then when the rezoning is granted, which it takes a year or two, then the applicant goes out to sales. And then, you know, once they're satisfied and get to a certain stage of sales, they're going to come in for site plans. Or what they're supposed to do is to open the sales office after the site plan is approval. And that long, lengthy, arduous 1 to 2 year process that begins. You know, they have to have the sales, they have to get their site plan approved, and then the building permit process. It takes 5 years for them to pull a building permit from when they come in here to apply. 4 to 5 years, 4 years is extremely quick from the day that they first apply, you know, or have a pre-submission consultation hearing. When they come in for a pre-submission consultation hearing in the next 1 to 2 years, we have to do everything we possibly can to work with the builders in this community to make sure they're getting building permits 5 years from now and pouring foundations 6 years from now. And that's the way this is going to happen. It's great to say on paper, yeah, we've got a lot in the process, a lot in the hopper, and things should go well, and we should probably hit the target. But I just wanted to clarify on the number of applications in process right now. What criteria did you put on that? I mean, there's people that could have got you know, rezoning 10 years ago and have no intention whatsoever of acting on it.
So the through you, Chair, to Councillor DiPaolo, the applications that we've cited are those that are currently active. They have not received approvals. Right, so we have a number of
received
units.
zoning approvals, site plan approvals,
It was OPA and zoning amendment approvals.
OPA and zoning. So we've
Sorry, my
learned that-
apology.
Yeah.
OPA and zoning amendment applications, right? Not approvals, because those are ones that are active.
Yeah, so they haven't got their OP and zoning approval. So well, we can't bank on that at all. We've learned, and certainly at the region and here, that there could be many applications for rezoning that just won't manifest into a building at the end of the day, into a housing unit. So, you know, I appreciate that work's being done. Perhaps we could know how many projects are seeking site plan approval and building permit approval. So I think that would be more helpful. And then we've got to go from there and figure out how many units we need to get zoning approved for and pushed all the way, because it has to happen in this term of council. If we don't approve in the next 2 to 3 years enough rezoning, official plan amendments to allow for the site plans, the sales, the building permits, and then pouring the foundation, which I can't see how anyone can do that in less than 4 years. So we have to do things differently, perhaps even inappropriately. It's never been our role to engage with people that are applying. We set policy, and we within a 30, 40, 50-year time frame, we plan a city. But now the province is forcing us to do things differently because they don't care what we do in 15 or 20 years. They only care what we do in the next 7 or 8, 6 or 7. That's what we're down to. They only care what we do in the next 6 or 7 years. And I guess in their wisdom, they see the housing crisis being such that we have to alter what we're doing at the municipal level. And it's going to mean a drastic change. And every single time we have an application in this term, in the next 2 years, we've got to do whatever we can to help these people get building and get started. We've had, I can cite a number of examples where it's kind of been on us for that it's cost the builder a month here, 6 months there. That can't happen 2 years from now. we can't be the cause of any delays. So we have to really know intimately every single application, and the only way for this to happen, for us to achieve the goal that's set before us, is to work with applicants, and you really got to get to know them, because some of them have no intentions of building whatsoever, but some of them are really ready to go, and they just need our help. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mayor West.
Thank you. I actually wanted to save my comments for when we pull a report later in the meeting, but I just wanted to make a couple of comments just to respond to a couple of things that have been said. I agree actually with almost everything that's been said, but I just want to be clear to, I think it was Regional Local Councillor Chan's point about, so as council knows, I've sent a response letter to Minister Calandra when we got notice that we were not going to be able to meet the targets. And I think that letter was very clear and quite the point about, why I think that that's inappropriate and unfair. I have been working with the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus to send out a similar letter, although I must admit that there are some of the OBCM municipalities that did make the target. So I'm suspecting there may be a little bit of hesitation in sending out a letter, although I would say to the municipalities that did meet the target, the system is still not particularly reflective of what it's trying to be reflective of. So they may get the money this year, but they might not get it next year. So I still think they need to be on board with our thinking anyway. I want to just comment as well on the use it or lose it, and just add to Director Flores's point that we were in a meeting a little while ago with Premier Ford, and he was speaking about the possibility of use it or lose it. And we were talking to him about how we were in agreement with that. But I have heard subsequently that, there's been some pushback from the development community. In fairness, I'm not entirely positive that use it or lose it is the silver bullet, but I think it's something it sounds like it's being explored by the provincial government, which is where it needs to come from, because we don't have the jurisdiction at our level to implement that effectively, in my opinion. I just something that Regional Local Councillor DePaulo said, I agree we can measure this in different ways, but measuring us at the zoning or site plan stage is not maybe as effective as I'd like to see either, because we still don't have the power of when an applicant comes for site plan approval or zoning. I mean, they can get most of the approvals and not be motivated in any way at all to go to the final step, let alone build it. So I'm not sure that really helps us. The main thing here is that we can be measured on the things we have control over. We should not be measured on the things we don't have control over. And that's the thing I find most offensive about this whole BFF thing. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that one of the biggest concerns that we all had as a council, and I certainly did as mayor, is when Bill 23 came out, there was a statement made by Premier Ford that any money that was lost through development charges, which are very important to us, would be reimbursed by the province. They would make us whole. When I remember very clearly sitting at AMO, and Premier Ford announced this Building Faster Fund, and that was the first thing that popped into my mind was, I hope that's not the making us whole part, because this isn't going to make us whole. And so I am very concerned about that, because if we're in a reduction in development charges and we are not being made up for those development charges through whatever mechanism, we are going to be at a competitive disadvantage. And that's very problematic, as we heard yesterday at the Capital Sustainability Committee. And the last thing I'll just say on this round is that the biggest concern that I have, and I think that the staff report and the presentation speaks very well to this, is that not only is this not fair, it's also not effective. I mean, and what we need, I think, as a municipality is incentives to change the behavior in that last but important step of the process, which is the builder actually building it, And unless we have those incentives to work with, nothing really substantial is going to change. We don't have the control over it. So, I mean, the not fair part, that's a problem. But the not effective part is a bigger problem, because if we can't actually incentivize building, the province isn't going to make their targets. But more importantly, from our perspective, I guess, our direct perspective, is we're not going to be able to provide the housing, and the housing that's affordable to more people. And that's the thing that keeps me up at night. So, you know, not having the money to do the things we need to do puts us at a competitive disadvantage. But at the end of the day, you know, we're all focused here when we signed that pledge on making the targets. So this is not helpful. And I'm really frustrated that an upper level of government would be imposing this when we've spoken to them repeatedly about the challenges that this is going to be putting on us. Believe it or not, that's not everything I have to say.
Well, your time is up, I'm
Okay.
afraid. Thank you. And now Councillor Silvett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add something. The elephant in the room here is affordable housing. That's the flat line. Because bills 23, 108 and 109 are all prefaced and premised on the fact that we, collective we in Ontario, are trying to build housing that's affordable or attainable. The problem is it's not, because it's all market value. We have no control over what a unit is going to be rented for, what a unit is going to be sold for. So you have condos that are built that can be $1 million each. Nobody can, people nowadays, that's not affordable, not to anybody. Wouldn't be to me. Purpose-built rental buildings. Yes, they've been approved and they are going to be built. But not one of those developers have stated, and in fact told me the exact opposite, that the rental will be market value. So if you want to rent a 2-bedroom in Richmond Hill, it's at the very least now, it's about $2,900. Really? There's nothing we can do about that. And with infill housing, with the attaining the 4-story proposals, I can't imagine there are many people, other than those who want to sell their homes infill and build a bigger house, which is a problem in and of itself, but that there are landowners or property owners that would build a housing unit, 4 stories, 4 units on one piece of infill property in Richmond Hill that's going to have a rental or a sale price that is anywhere near affordable. And that's the elephant in the room. And I just really had to say that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I think that time we have everyone. And I thank you for the presentation. And Regional Councillor and Local Councillor DePola has moved to accept this presentation. All those in favor? All right, thank you. Thank you very much. It's passed. It has passed. Thank you. Next, we have delegations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to advise committee that regrettably the first delegation had to leave the meeting and won't be presenting. So we can go.
Okay,
right to
there
the
were
second.
2 people here. Are they both gone?
There was only,
Angela Kurlesh is here? No. Okay, that one's okay. So we'll move on to the next one. Maria Van Haltern. Please come, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you for taking part. And the floor is yours.
Mayor West, council members, and members of Heritage Committee that are here, thank you for your time today. My name is Marina Van Haltern, and I live at 90 Center Street East. My house is on the delegate list. My late husband lived in Richmond Hill all his life, and I've lived here for 40 years and in this particular home for 30. We raised 7 children in this home. We love history, we love antiques and old homes, and when we added an addition in 1999 for our growing family here at the Center Street, we received an award from the town of Richmond Hill for doing a great job in keeping the character of the home. My request is not to delegate my home. When it comes to heritage delegation, I do speak from experience. My husband and I purchased a home from the town of Richmond Hill, a historical home, 32 Frank and Dean. And it's a choice we made and we loved. The property came at a discount as an incentive to restore the home as close to the original as possible. And this is the choice that we made. We worked with the Heritage Committee, and it was not always easy. There were conflicts, and we needed help resolving them at our cost and lost time. But again, it was the choice we made. My home was selected here at 90 Center because of specific heritage features and historical context. The reality is there is very little of the original home left. So a heritage designation doesn't make sense. All the features listed as heritage are in fact new. We've put in dormers. We've replaced the siding with vinyl siding. We've replaced the columns and bases of the porch. We've replaced the windows. We've added shutters. And the chimney also was added on. The point of heritage designation is to keep a home as original as possible. For 90 Center, this is but a distant memory. Even though we have done what we could to preserve the look and historical feel of our home out of an appreciation for history, a heritage designation does not fit with the purpose or intention of this act, given its largely renovated state. The Edwardian four-square design is a common design in Ontario and in Richmond Hill. There are many houses in Richmond Hill on the list in Richmond Hill in this same design that are much closer to the original than my home and that retain the original features. Another reason for the selection was the historical context. This was the builder's William Graham's first home. He built over 30 houses in this area as well as the McConaughey Center. There also already is a park on Church Street designated to commemorate his memory. His name is being remembered and promoted in the area. A second home he built that he lived in was 13 Church Street, and it's located 3 doors from the William Graham Park. Perhaps this or one of the many other homes he built, which are more original than mine, would be a better choice. Having heritage designation does not have any advantage to the homeowner. Instead, it makes the process of improving my home onerous. There are restrictions and limitations and regulations that are imposed on the homeowner. Essentially, I lose the right to maintain the house the way I want to. Not that I'm going to mess it up. I want to keep it historically accurate, but also reasonable. I would have to check in with the Heritage Committee anytime I wanted to repair, paint, or improve my home. The city of Richmond Hill would supersede my right to use my property, and I have a problem with this. So please, I ask that you respect my wishes as a homeowner. I appreciate the work of the Heritage Committee, and I did speak to the ladies here, and I'm really grateful for them. But committee members do change, and it is subjective. So in the end, what does the town get out of it? My home, I feel, has been targeted, and I'm not willing. There are people who are willing. Then let them take it. So I just ask that you consider my request. Thank you for your time.
And thank you for appearing. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So I believe our next delegate is Liz Bitt. Online. Okay, can you hear me, Ms. Bick? And we can't see you. Oh, there you are. Oh, I think you might be on mute. There,
Hear me
hello?
now?
We can. Thank you for joining us, and you have the floor, 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Committee of the Whole. The picture that you see now is the original way our house was built, just for your reference. My name is Liz Bick, and I am the owner of 3739 Center Street West. 39 Center has been in my family since 1912. My husband and I moved here in 1980. In 1987, we purchased 37 Center so as to retain control of both properties. Our daughter and her family now reside in number 37. It is our wish and intent to preserve this property and to hand it down to future generations of our family. Since we have moved here, we have strived to maintain the properties in their original format as much as possible within reason. While the home itself was built in 1891, many of its original features have been replaced as a result of wear and tear over the years. Some of the historical features are no longer in existence. For example, the side porch on 37 is no longer the porch built by John L. Innes for William Proctor. The stained glass transoms over the round top windows are no longer all original. The attic windows on the north exposure are not original. The front facade of the building is vastly different from its original build, as you can see from this picture. While my family and I honor the history of the home, unfortunately, over the course of many years, both the design and some of the significant historical features have been altered. A designation of the property as a historical home will create a vast number of difficulties for us and place us in a highly prejudiced predicament. Sadly, a historical designation automatically reduces the number of contractors whom are qualified to work on the home and further automatically increases the cost for many reasons. Many contractors use designation as a tool to gouge homeowners with no other choice but to retain their services. Many contractors are not equipped with knowledge, materials, or tools to tackle such a project. Additionally, the cost and time required to apply for permits to do any types of renovations or repairs to the property will have an adverse effect on our ability to maintain the property in a reasonable and cost-effective manner. The grant offered to designated properties requires time to pursue and is not significant given the high costs of materials in 2024. To phase an improvement over several years to receive more grant money is not feasible, keeping the homeowner in construction chaos indefinitely, and return to normalcy is delayed for 3 or 4 years. In addition, availability of like product may not be possible from 1 year to the next, i.e. a roof or windows. My family and I love our home and honor its history. However, we are not in favor of the designation of our property, as it will cause a great deal of undue hardships and stress to us, and may ultimately force us to give up ownership of our beloved family home as a result. We respectfully ask that the committee consider our years of dedication to maintaining and preserving the integrity of our home without creating added burden in allowing us to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for participating. And that is the end of delegations. The next item, I believe, is 11.3.2. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I want to speak on the next item.
11.3.2. Okay, thank you. So moving on to 11.3.2, notice of intention to designate 90 Center Street East, and Councillor DiPaolo.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Effectively, Committee of the Whole is recommending to Council that 8 of the 10 proposed properties stated an intention for designation have been recommended to Council, and we're going forward with those. And I think everyone understands why we're here. The legislative changes have caused us to take a more critical look at listed properties, and we no longer have a choice. it can't be listed. And, or it can't be designated or listed. It now has to be designated or there has to be a waiting period if we're removing anything from the list. I think based on the delegations, we have some exceptional cases here. And I don't think there's any harm done to the heritage value of our community. If these two properties, in this case, I'm speaking to 90 Center Street West and Center Street East, sorry. I think if 90 Center Street East was removed from the list and treated as all other properties in Richmond Hill, and I think we've had a delegation come forward that stated a clear intention that there's no desire to move. The size of the home on the property, creates an extremely low risk that someone is going to come in for a demolition permit and build a larger home on the property. That it just really can't be done. There's no economical way to do so on, and Center Street East, we don't have that immediacy that is coming with some other properties across Richmond Hill, where they're part of land parcels around Yonge Street that are imminently exposed to redevelopment. So because of that and because of the extreme circumstances, the case that was made here, I'm not concerned about precedent. I'm not concerned that removing 90 Center Street East from our list creates a dangerous precedent, because if apples to apples occurs and someone else comes forward with a similar argument and a similar demonstration of long history in Richmond Hill and preserving other properties, that the delegation explained a very significant project that they've undertaken, and it's shown and demonstrated that their willingness to preserve and protect heritage in Richmond Hill, with the property beside Walmart, that they've gone to great lengths working with our staff and adhering to all the principles of a designated property, and have made renovations and improvement there. So I think it's a unique case. I'm not concerned about precedent. And Madam Chair, I'd like to move a motion that 90 Center Street East not be given a notice of intention to designate.
Thank you. I'm going to defer to the Mr. Clerk to tell me, to give me some direction there. There's a curveball I haven't had yet.
Thank you. No, I think there is now, my advice, a motion on the floor on this. I just have to figure out what the language of that motion is, because this is unique. That will be open for debate and discussion, as is any other motion.
Thank you.
So I'll let the clerk put on the screen what he thought he heard from me, and just clarify before I allow others to speak. I'll place it on the floor.
So just to clarify, this stops discussion about the previous item. And now people will discuss this motion. And only that motion. Thank you. So much support on council.
Doing great. Last term, they're really supportive of the chair also.
Thank you. If I might, through the chair, before we proceed, and just to confirm with the regional local councillor, in text discussions with heritage staff, they actually believe that simply if you use the motion to receive for information only, which is the usual parliamentary procedure, that you take no further action on a staff report. Are you okay with that?
Content with that, as it achieves what I intended. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you read it, please? Okay, we're good. Okay, so we have a new motion, notice of intention to designate to receive this report. Does anyone want to speak to this? Yes, Councillor Silvans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While I appreciate and respect Regional Councillor DePaulo's words, I don't support them. I want to thank the resident who stepped forward to speak to us about this, and I appreciate that we stand supposedly on opposing sides. However, what we are doing here is not about attrition, it is about necessity. And that necessity has been laid at our feet bare through Bill 23. So sorry, I was just throwing a bit of a loop here. As the chair of Heritage Richmond Hill, we've went through extensive discussions at committee meeting to bring this forward to Committee of the Whole. Our votes at Heritage Richmond Hill Committee all passed unanimously to bring this to Committee of the Whole and ultimately to Council in order to approve the recommendations by staff. And I stand by that. And I understand how difficult this is. It's actually very difficult for us as well. But I believe, as the chair of the committee and as an elected representative who sits on this council, that we are beholden to do whatever we can to protect our heritage, specifically because it is now under such threat. We will lose over 200 designated homes at the end of this year. And there's nothing we can do about it. I am sympathetic and sorry for the imposition, in inverted commas, that this puts on the land, the homeowner, the heritage homeowner. But again, this is not about attrition, this is about necessity. And I believe that we have, it absolutely behooves us to ensure that the approximately 30 houses that are going to be chosen through this year, that we move forward with the best intents, and the best intents are for designation to protect these homes. So I can't support the motion in front of us, and I ask for a recorded vote, please.
Thank you. You're finished?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, this particular property is in my ward. I've met with the owner and spoken with them along with the mayor. There's a number of things about this property that were raised during the delegation here. And I know that staff have actually addressed a number of those things as well, in terms of the new dormers added. That this is one of the things that I had asked about, is about attributes, and how attributes are listed. So I know that the designation that they're looking for, that staff are looking for, is only for the dormers that were original, not the ones that were added separate. So I know there's those types of things that are going to be discussed, but what we did hear from the delegate is that they've actually owned a heritage property before. They know what they're in for when they have a designated property. And so although I know that our staff aren't going to say that these are restrictions, they are another layer that the homeowner has to go through when they want to make modifications. You know, staff are certainly there to guide them and so forth in that manner. However, I guess what in the end, what I feel for the delegate here is that they feel like they're being penalized when they've been excellent stewards to the home. And there was a reason why I asked at the end of the presentation earlier today about risk, because I don't see this property as a high risk. And, you know, as local and regional councillor DePaula had outlined, he doesn't see it as a high risk either. And I think when we have good stewards out there, you know, protecting these homes, they've been doing this, you know, this particular applicant for 30 years. You're going to hear another one where it's in their family since 1912. You know, I feel that we should not be putting them in the imposition. I realize that we've been put in the imposition through Bill 23. I think it's our duty to not make it an imposition for our residents as well. So I'm, you know, if and when this comes up, and if Regional Local Councillor DePaula wants to move the motion that he was talking about before, then obviously I would certainly be willing to second that if that comes up. But right now we're here just to receive for information only, and I certainly support the direction that we're at this point in time. Thank you.
Mayor West.
Thank you. So as I said earlier in my comments, this is really, in my mind, one of the many things we do in our jobs here to achieve some sort of a balance, albeit a imperfect balance, but I think it's a balance. And what we're trying to do here is to weigh and balance the needs of individual homeowners in the community at large. And what I'm going to say, I won't bother talking to the second one either, because this and the other one on Center Street are similar in a lot of ways in terms of what I would say. The thing is, like, I agree with what's being said here, and clearly the delegate in both of these cases made a very, very compelling argument about how they've been great stewards over the years, and that their family has lived there a long time. And I have no debate about that. And the evidence is right there. The question, though, I guess, is that, things change, and over time, the next owner may or may not feel the same way. They might not. But what this does is it protects the heritage character of the building to whatever degree we have over the longer term and period of time. So it's not just for today, it's for future. And this is what this is really all about. With all due respect, though, to the opposing, members of council here, I mean, I understand your arguments. There's no right answer here. It's just a matter of trying to achieve a balance. I do appreciate the fact that Councillor Silovitz brought up the fact that being the chair of Heritage Richmond Hill, and just reminding council members that we delegate to Heritage Richmond Hill some advice to give us and recommendations to give us as council. And this is what they and our staff have come up. So it's not like, we're just pulling this out of the air. It has gone through a process. But I won't be able to support the motion on the screen, but I really, this is a really difficult one because, it is all about trying to strike a balance. I'm of the opinion that I think we should be going with what staff recommendations are, but in this particular case, as always, it's up to council to make their decision on that. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I see no other comments. We have a motion. Oh, Councillor Chan.
Thank you. I wasn't thinking about speaking on this, but the mayor just said in perfect balance. But just going through my balancing act, I'm wondering, and on one hand, I respect the process, and we do have that Heritage Advisory Committee to recommend to committee now of the whole and then council later on of the city to make a decision. And I'm thinking about what's the end result? What's the end point for all this? The destination or not? If I understand it correctly, the end point is to have that persuasion and protection, maybe even the right term, of properties that will be designated. On the other hand, that we certainly have in this case, the homeowner who have been coming to us, stating the reasons why she and her family do not want to be designated. So honestly, I'm struggling with that. You know, what are the right processes to get to the end point? Designation is only one of the process. So through Madam Chair, perhaps I would like to get some advice, a professional view from our staff who have already undertaken a thorough study. I'm sure they have presented to the Heritage Advisory Committee in the past. Because we have colleagues here talking about risk. I'd like to hear a bit more about risk as well as opportunities. And if it's not, if the property as recommended is not designated, risk in the sense of not just whether it will be demolished, risk whether in fact, I'm thinking about ramification under the Bill 23, which actually make us do this. Chair. So a question to our fashion heritage staff for input. Thank you.
Okay, so through the chair, I believe the question is about risk and what risk it poses. So quite often we see backfilling of lots when properties get further subdivided and then properties get sold off to build infill developments. That's why certain properties have been identified as having high risk. And as was pointed out earlier too, yes, we agree that the property owners currently have been great stewards and they've maintained the property very well. But because we do not know what the future of the ownership of the property holds, what we're protecting is the property itself. Tomorrow, if the property gets sold to someone else who doesn't have the same opinion, they may significantly alter the property and we'd lose the heritage attributes. So that's why we've considered these properties as high risk.
Okay, so thank you for that. And through Madam Chair, what would be the ramification with, let's say, the motion in front of us, or maybe other motion that has been alluded to, that would that have any ramification? Because this is all, I guess, not guided, but really actually directed by Bill 23. Was that any contravention or any ramification? That's what I'm thinking of through Madam Chair, to the staff.
So through the chair, should council not vote on issuing its intent to designate the property, we would then lose the property. The property by the end of the year would fall off the register. If this report is being considered for information only, and if it was to be brought back to council once again through another committee of the whole, the ramifications would be to the deadline that we have to meet, which is before the end of the year. So essentially, this staff report would then come back again in its entirety with no modifications necessarily. And as mentioned before, an objection to this can always be submitted by the property owner through the objection process, which could happen once council issues its notice of intention to designate the property. So that, yes, I hope that clarifies.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful. This is, in a sense, the first kick of the can, so to speak, if this motion in front of us is being passed. It's likely coming back, so that I just repeating what you're saying to ensuring I understand correctly. So even assuming this motion is passed by majority, so to speak, there will be a report coming back before the end of the year from staff because you're obligated to do so. Is that, would I understand it correctly?
So
Do you, Madam
through-
Chair?
Through the chair, if you were to vote on the original, not the motion, but the original staff report, and you say
It's done.
we're not designating,
It's done.
done, it's done.
Right.
This one, again, this is very new to staff as well, but I believe you aren't necessarily voting on not designating the property. You're simply receiving the staff report for information. Sorry, one second.
Apologize. Through the chair, maybe I can help clarify, and I do appreciate the uniqueness, especially of these parliamentary procedures. If the motion on your screen passes as is to receive for information only, under the procedural bylaws reconsideration rules, staff would not bring this back in any way, shape, or form. The only way to do so would be by members' motion, because this is effectively telling staff that the file is closed. And then the procedural bylaws reconsideration rules apply, which you could only do by members' motion.
Thank you very much. That would help. No more questions. And thank you for the clarification from also Mr. Clerk as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And next we have Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. So under the build faster, more policy, what happened to this heritage house? So because we are allowed to split a house into 2, 3, 4 households. So does this also apply to the heritage house?
Through the chair, yes, it would.
Okay, so but they have to how do they preserve all the artifacts when they split into 3?
So through the chair, it depends on how the property is being subdivided. Yes, they would have to come in for a heritage permit, which is how we would review and assess and evaluate the application in front of us. If the question is about additional residential units, if it does not impact the exterior of the property, we would not seek a heritage permit. We would not have any heritage comments on it. However, if a lot is being subdivided into multiple lots, it would have to go through a heritage permit process.
Okay, but I'm just thinking who would move in a house, who is designated, so it couldn't, it's very unlikely that it will be split into 2, 3, or 4, and it's not achieving the build more and faster policy. No? Okay. Anyways, sorry, I apologize. What triggered this destination?
Sorry, through the chair, could you repeat the question, please?
What triggered this destination and the next one?
Oh, so
Through you,
through
Madam
the
Chair.
chair, so we have around 236 listed properties.
Yeah.
We went through a screening and an evaluation process to identify about 30 to 40 properties only. And we looked at the risk factors as well as the value that the properties bring. So these particular properties that are in front of you today, they meet more than 2 of the criteria as mandated by the province through the Ontario Heritage Act. So the Act has 9 criteria, and if a property meets at least 2, it can be considered for designation. The properties that are being brought forward for the duration of this year have met 2 or more. Some of the properties also meet about 4 to 5 criteria of the 9.
Thank you. So how many more are we expecting to come to council like this?
Through the chair, we're aiming at between 30 to 40 properties this year of the 236 listed properties that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm also a member of the Heritage Committee. And I think it takes extra effort to protect history, and there's no doubt about that. And I know for homeowners, the value of their home is their biggest investment, and it may cause hardship. But I also think we need to save our heritage. I ask this in all honesty, after this year, we can still apply to have properties designated as heritage, right?
Through the chair, yes.
And I ask this again, like, in all honesty, if this family who've taken great care of this house sell, and then the next owner comes, in terms of process, what's faster, after this year, getting a house designated as heritage or issuing a demolition permit?
A demolition permit would be issued much faster.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you. Oh, all right. Over to Councillor DePaula.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just briefly, like to wrap up by saying, we're going to have a lot of these properties come forward over the course of the year. As was said, 30 to 40 or more. We've got 10 today, eight we've adopted. There's a reason that council acts as a filter, and I trust the Heritage Committee and their work and our staff's work, and that, probably 39 out of 40 or 38 out of 41 recommendations we are going to adopt and move forward. But our job is to be a common sense filter. And in light of the delegation and that our staff has said, the only thing at issue here is ownership on title right now. That's the only thing creating risk. These properties can't be changed. They're not going to be changed. And we have every assurance and every reason to believe, I confidently believe, that we can still designate. I'm just saying not now. I'm not saying not never. I'm saying these are valuable. There's a reason these properties were originally listed. We're not losing heritage designation properties. We've got our eyes on 200 properties, and now the province has changed the way things are done, and the ones that we've got our eyes on, the most critical ones, we've got to designate now when they're at risk. I appreciate the support of the local councillor for this motion. Effectively, what we're doing is we're saying that we take no action, that we recommend council take no action on this recommendation. So I don't think anyone is more familiar with Center Street East on this council. So I really appreciate and respect that. It's about individual properties. That's what we do. We adjudicate on a common sense basis on the individual properties. Even though all those merits and everything have been met, we take a further look and we give the public an opportunity to talk to us. And in light of the delegation with regards to this particular property, I have every confidence. And if somebody else shows a demonstrated long history in Richmond Hill and having preserved and worked with our city on another heritage property, then I have no problem giving the same benefit of the doubt. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion. Oh, second round goes to Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I do want to say that I understand the difficulty that we're under. This is all timeline driven, and the moment we start discussing each one of these properties that comes up, and making it a situation where we start to delay the process, and when we've got these very finite timelines that we're already looking at, I know that can be somewhat problematic. And as it's indicated, we're going to be looking at between 30 and 40 of these between now and the end of the year. So do we really want to be having these types of discussions? And I still look at it in terms of it's important that we have these discussions. So if in a situation like this, where we're talking about good stewards that are taking care of these properties, I don't see them as high risk. Now, if somebody wants to come, so if there's another property that comes up where we know that they have not been taking care of it, for reasons where they're just trying to do demolition, by decay, then yeah, I would say particularly if it's of significant value, absolutely. We just want to have those properties saved, because we do have what I would consider a deadbeat owner. So again, I'm coming back to, and similar to local and regional councillor DePaula, that we're looking at people that have demonstrated that they're good stewards. In this particular case, it's somebody who's actually owned a heritage property beforehand and knows the ins and outs. I just don't see why we would go in a direction that makes it difficult for our residents when we're here trying to help our residents. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Silovitz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank my colleagues for this discussion. It's a very good discussion to have. And as I said previously, I appreciate and respect everything that has been said here, both for and against. However, what I do want to say and what I want to put on the record, which I believe is also very important, and Councillor Davidson knows this as a member of Heritage Richmond Hill, and that is the time and effort that has gone in to identifying just these 10 houses. We have not only the Heritage Richmond Hill Committee, but we have a subcommittee that was struck in order to identify homes and bring it to the point that it comes to Heritage Richmond Hill and then forward to Committee of the Whole and Council. We have professional staff who do an unbelievable job under some very, very trying circumstances. They are professional heritage planners, and I know, and I'm sure that most people would know, that any recommendation that comes, specifically for this particular one, 11.3.2, this does not come easily, these recommendations. And the recommendations from the committee to council do not come easily, but we have had workshops, we have had discussions at Heritage Richmond Hill level in order to ensure presentations, in order to ensure that the committee absolutely understood what we were doing and what was at stake. So again, I don't say that I don't believe that there's a question here about the good stewardship. I would actually say excellent stewardship that the owner of 90 Center Street East has obviously demonstrated through the decades. That's not an issue. That's not before this council, and that's not an issue. What is before this council is the necessity to have it placed as on the designated list. So I just wanted to add that to the story, that this is not a fly-by-night decision. It's not a fly-by-night decision that comes to Heritage Richmond Hill through staff and the subcommittee. It's not a fly-by-night decision that comes from decision and recommendation from Heritage Richmond Hill to Committee of the Whole and Council. It has been through months of work and hours of work, very carefully thought out and very carefully processed to this point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it for remarks, and we have a motion on the floor.
With a request for recorded.
Oh, we want a recorded vote? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So voting on the motion moved by Regional Local Councillor DePaula to receive this matter for information only, Councillor Silovitz.
No.
Thank you. Regional Local Councillor DePaula.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Liu.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Tree.
Yes.
Thank you. Regional Local Councillor Chan. Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Shiu.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson.
No.
Thank you. Mayor West.
No.
Thank you. That motion does carry.
Okay, thank you. I asked the clerk, is it time for a break?
Thank you to the chair and members. Yes, pursuant to the procedure bylaw, we actually have been meeting for 2.5 hours and it is 12 noon. So I would encourage that the recess be taken now for lunch for up to an hour.
For how long? 1 hour?
Usually it's an hour, essentially it allow people to get food and stuff.
So we'll
We're
meet-
actually,
Meet back here at 1 o'clock.
yes.
Sharp. Okay, thank you.